Pastor Chuck Swindoll begins his reflections on Psalm 46 with these words that hopefully immediately register the relevance of the psalm to us. He writes, "We deny it, we fake it, we mask it, we try to ignore it, but the truth stubbornly persists. We are weak creatures. Being sinful, we fail. Being prone to sickness, we hurt. Being mortal, we ultimately die. Pressure wears on us. Anxiety gives us ulcers. People intimidate us. Criticism offends us. Disease scares us. Death haunts us. How can we continue to grow in this bag of bones covered with weakness too numerous to mention? We need a big dose of Psalm 46. It's said that Martin Luther, who, as you know, was one of the great leaders of the Protestant Reformation, used to be hammered by people all the time. You know, anytime you're out leading in a remarkable movement like the Reformation, you become a target. And so when things would get very, very fierce for Luther, it is said that he would say to his protege, a guy by the name of Philip Melanchthon, he would say, "Philip, we need to sing together Psalm 46. And they would sing together this wonderful psalm, which later Luther turned into a hymn that we know and that we will sing at the end of our service. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark or a flood wall that never fails. This particular psalm may have been occasioned by something that happened in Israel, and it may not have been, but some people suggest that this really kind of was the product of this experience. There was a guy, the general of the Assyrian army, a guy by the name of Sennacherib. He came upon Jerusalem and surrounded it and basically said, "You guys get ready because we're to come in and we're going to level the city. Either surrender or we'll take you the hard way." The king at the time was a guy by the name of Hezekiah, and Hezekiah was actually a godly king in Israel. And so he went before the Lord and he said, "Lord, we're sitting ducks here. There is no way that we are a match for this Assyrian army." And so he placed his city in the hands of God. The next morning they woke up and they were amazed that the army was gone except for 185,000 dead soldiers. God, in the night, without ever a sword being sharpened or a horse being mounted, had killed those people. And Sennacherib and his army disappeared. Whether or not that's the circumstance, we don't know, but it sure fits. It sure illustrates what this psalm is about. Now, if you want to understand the psalm, you notice that there are three places where, depending on your translation, it could say Selah, or in the New Living Translation, it says interlude. And so if you look at it, it kind of divides the psalm into three parts. And so we're going to look at the three verses, if you will, of this song, because it does say that this is for the choir director, a song of the descendants of Korah to be sung by soprano voices. I don't know why it was soprano voices, but the ladies sang this. The first thing that he tells us is that God is our refuge and can handle anything. Listen to the words. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come, the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. Now, if you start at the back of that and work start at the back and then move back to the beginning, you kind of get the idea. So the question is, how do you stand when life is assaulting you? How do you stand in the midst of the natural disasters? How do you stand when a hurricane or a tornado is coming your way or a flood is washing over your community? How do you stand when the doctor gives you a diagnosis that you really don't want to hear and don't feel you're prepared for? How do you stand when someone that you love is being lowered into the ground? How do you stand when your employer comes in and says, "I'm sorry, but we're cutting back and this will be your last day"? How do you stand in those times? Well, we argue back from this, and what we're told is that God is our refuge. He is our strength. He is the one that will prop us up and sustain us and protect us in those times. Now, a lot of us like this verse, Psalm 46:1. It's one of the memory verses. You might even have it on your refrigerator someplace. God is our refuge and our strength, and we profess that. But the truth is, in practice, we don't actually do that. I made a list of some of the other things that we may look to for refuge. We trust our financial security, that we have enough money in the bank, our physical strength, our mastery of various skills. It could be your self-defense skills. It could be your business acumen. It could be your ability to think on your feet. But you say, I can get myself out of any problem. We may trust our education or our wisdom. Say, I've got smarts, and if I don't have degrees, I have street smarts, and I'm just going to trust my smarts. We trust our associations. I hope nobody here is in the mafia or in a gang, but some people trust that. You may trust the people that you know, the influential, powerful people that are involved in your life. If I ever get in trouble, these people will come to my aid. We trust our government. They will give us what we need. If we need money, they will have to jump through some hoops, but they will always be there to take care of us. We trust our powerful military. We trust our doctors. We trust the goodness of others. People are basically good. They're going to rally to our defense. We trust our experience. And even in weather times, we might even trust the National Weather Service. See, we trust all these other things that are not bad things, but they're not the Lord. These things will disappoint us. They have their limits, and some of them can take you farther than others, but they're all limited. And so what the psalmist is reminding us is that we need to come back to this point where we say there is only one who can protect us. There is only one who can defend us. There is only one who can prop us up in the storms of life, and that is the Lord. In the second verse, we're told not only that God is our refuge and can handle anything, but we're told that when we stand in him, we are secure, verses 4-7. A river brings joy to the city of our God, the sacred home of the Most High, which would be talking about Jerusalem. God dwells in that city. It cannot be destroyed. From the very break of day, God will protect it. The nations around them, are in chaos, and their kingdoms crumble. God's voice thunders, and the earth melts. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Now, the picture here, again, think about if it was this situation with Sennacherib, that the idea is that, look, Jerusalem is impenetrable. The armies cannot get in here because God is our defense. Understand, he's not saying that if you want refuge and strength in your life, you need to move to Jerusalem. We all know that may not be a good idea in our current state of affairs. Jerusalem itself was vulnerable. In 586, the Babylonians came in and destroyed Jerusalem. In 70 AD, the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem, and Jerusalem really hasn't fully recovered even from that destruction in 70 AD. The temple's never been rebuilt since then. So it's not Jerusalem. It was the fact that God was abiding in Jerusalem that made that a secure place. And the psalmist says, you look at all the nations around us, you look at all these people who don't have faith in God, and they will be destroyed. They will crumble. They may look good for a while. Empires may rise, but empires will also fall. People may look like they're beating the system, but eventually the Lord will outshine them and outlast them and defeat them. The picture is that God is in their midst. Now, a great illustration of that is Jesus on the Sea of Galilee. And you probably remember the story. Jesus had had a long day, and he and the disciples got in the boat, and they were going across the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus fell asleep in the boat. And the storm came up, as storms are wont to do on the Sea of Galilee. Remember, these are experienced fishermen. These are people who are experienced with the seas. But this storm was a whopper, and they were feeling that they were being threatened with death, and they're bailing, and they're trimming sails, and they're doing all the stuff that they need to do. And all this time, the storm is raging, and the boat's rocking. Jesus is sleeping. And at first, they just did their job. But then, as they looked over at Jesus and saw him sleeping, and this is what happens to all of us, doesn't it? You saw him sleeping, and you start getting a little ticked off. Why aren't you worried like the rest of us? Don't you ever feel that way sometimes? Doggone it, why aren't you as upset as I am? Why aren't you suffering like I am? Misery does love company. And so finally, these guys actually say to Jesus, don't you care that we're going to drown? Probably not a good idea to talk to Jesus that way. And we're told that Jesus stood up in the boat, and he says to the wind and the waves, peace, be still. And then, whew, there was stillness. It wasn't like the waves died down. It was still. Now imagine being one of the disciples. Surely, if it was today, there'd be somebody that would whisper under their breath, whoa. Whoa. And we're told that the disciples were terrified. Not by the storm, but by the power of the one who calmed the storm. And then Jesus said to them, why were you afraid? Now, we might be tempted to say, well, duh, there was this storm going on and we thought we were going to die. But they didn't say that. Jesus was making a point, and here it is. When the Son of Man is in the boat, being in the boat is the safest place to be, no matter what else is going on. Get that? When the Son of Man is in the boat, when the Son of Man is in the city, when the Son of Man is in your life, you are in the safest place there is in the world. Because he cannot and will not be overcome. And that's what the psalmist reminds us of. Now this provokes a question, doesn't it? How do I get to that point? How do I get to the point where the Son of Man is in my life? How do I tap into that refuge? Okay, I believe it, but I don't know how to get there. I'm going to give you 3 steps. Number 1, recognize the futility of standing in your own strength and goodness. Think about it. You can stand outside and you see a tornado coming, and you can, put your fist up and say, I will not allow you to come into our community. But if the tornado comes into that community, it will pick you up like a piece of dust and throw you to the side, or worse, right? No matter how much bravado we show, no matter how much strength we think we have, we do not have the strength to deal with some of the things that life throws at us. It's just too overwhelming. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to understand that circumstances can knock us down. And if you don't believe that, think about how one germ, how one maverick cancer cell, how one blood clot can change your life immediately, can take your life. Think about it. We are really helpless in this world in which we live. We can call ourselves the most powerful, most intelligent people in the world, but we really are very limited in what we can do. Second, we need to understand that there is a barrier that exists between us and God, and we need to deal with it. The problem is sin, and you hear that all the time in church. Sin's bad. We know that sin is bad, but sin is not just the things that we do. Sin is an attitude and a mindset which we possess. And that is that we tend to rebel against God. We resist anybody telling us what to do, even if it's the Almighty God. God says, you shall not do this. And we have a tendency inside of us to say, oh yeah? Oh yeah? I'm going to show you what I can and cannot do. I will do whatever it is I want to do. And that attitude is keeping us from this refuge that is found in the Lord. Let's draw a picture. Let's suppose that there is this deadly bacteria that is found in this lake, this wonderful swimming hole, this place that you love to go. And so they find it, and so they cordon it off. They put signs up. They actually have people out there warning people, do not go into the water, because if you go into the water, this can kill you. It is a deadly bacteria that's in there. But you have had a tough day. It's been hot. You've been dreaming about a nice swim in your favorite lake. So you drive up and you see that signs are there, you hear the warnings from everybody else, but you run past them and you jump into the water and you go, oh. And as you swim out to the lake, you're making fun of everybody else. Say, you guys are all so chicken. I'm having a great time. Don't you wish you were in here? See, if you just did what I did, you too could be happy and you're having a great time. Until all of a sudden you realize that something's wrong. You're starting to get weak, and you're feeling nauseous, and you know that you are in trouble. In fact, you're in so much trouble that you know you can't get back to the shore. You've been a fool. But somebody comes out from the shore in a boat, and they hurry out there, and they have some, we're making up the story, so they've got some antibiotic that they can give you to start counteracting what this is all about. And so they pull you into the boat, they give you this shot, and they bring you to the shore, they put you on a helicopter, the helicopter takes you to the hospital, they work on you for days, you're in intensive care, but you come through. That guy who jumped into the water is us. That's us. We do that all the time. God sets up these barriers and these parameters, and he says, don't go here because this is dangerous. Don't do these things because it will kill you. It will take your strength away. It'll take your life away. But we go plunging out there. And sin, at first, is wonderfully enjoyable. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be tempting, right? So we've got friends who are out there, but they're doing those things and they're just getting along just fine. Why can't I do those kinds of things? Why can't I fool around? Or why can't I cheat? Why can't I do those kinds of things? But the message is, wait. They look good now, but the poison is going to get to their bodies. And they are going to be destroyed ultimately. So we need to recognize that there's a problem. And then the third thing we need to do is that we need to take advantage of God's solution. So we admit that we're helpless. We recognize that there was a problem between us and God, and it's a problem of sin. It's not just our behavior, it's an attitude of our lives. It is a rebellious mindset that is a part of all of us. And so the third step is we must say, Lord, I need your help. You need to give me the antidote. You need to provide for me what I cannot provide for myself. And that's really what the gospel's about, isn't it? That Jesus came into the world to do for us what we could not do for ourselves. To pay for our sin, to give his life as a payment for our sin, and then to give us the righteousness or the health or the antibody that we could not earn on our own. So that instead of dying, we could live. So we must come to that point where we say, okay, I'm helpless, I'm lost, but Jesus has come to find me. And the New Testament tells us that if we will come to him, we will find strength, and we will find refuge, and we will have that protection that we long for. The last verse is in verses 8 through 11. And basically, I think all the psalmist is telling us is, okay, now that you know these things, that God is our refuge and can handle anything, that we are our people, when we stand in him, we're secure. So now do it, is basically what it's saying. Verse 8, Come, see the glorious works of the Lord. See how he brings destruction on the world. You see, there's this invitation. Come, see, be a part of this. He causes wars to end throughout the earth. He breaks the bow and snaps the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. The picture here is that of a battlefield. And he's helping us to see the ultimate end of society. And he's saying, look out, look at the results of those who rebel against the Lord. They eventually will be destroyed. And the picture is kind of like jungles of Vietnam that are on fire with napalm. Bombed out cities in Europe after World War II. The devastation of Pearl Harbor. The rubble of the World Trade Center. I mean, these are the images that he would be bringing today. He's saying, this is the result of what happens when God's judgment comes. Not saying that those things were acts of God's judgment, but those are pictures of the way the world will be when God finally stands up and says, all right, enough. And he says, be still and know that I am God. Now, that phrase, I think, in the context of this text, is actually like Jesus speaking to the wind and the waves. Be still. And this is God standing up and saying to the world, be still and know that I am God. And the world will be brought to its knees. But there's also a sense in which that's what needs to happen to us when we're going through the time of crisis. We need to be still. We need to be quiet. We need to remember that he is the one who is God. James Montgomery Boyce relates the story of Elizabeth Elliot. Here's the story. She suffered the loss of 2 husbands. The first, Jim Elliot, was killed by the Auca Indians in Ecuador while he was trying to reach them with the gospel. Imagine how difficult that would be to embrace that my husband died trying to be honoring to the Lord. The second, Addison Leach, was slowly consumed by cancer. In relating what these experiences were like, she referred to this psalm, saying that in the first shock of death, everything that has seemed most dependable has given way. Mountains are falling, earth is reeling. In such a time, it is a profound comfort to know that although all things seem to be shaken, one thing is not. God is not shaken. She added that the thing that is most needful is to do what the psalmist does later, to be still and to know that he is God. God is God whether we recognize it or not, but it comforts us and infuses strength into our faltering spirits to rest on that truth. So let me ask you the question. Are storm clouds circling your life? Do things seem to be falling apart around you? You face a choice. You can do battle in your own strength and lose. Maybe not initially. Maybe you'll win the initial battles, but you will lose ultimately. Or you can run to the one who provides refuge and strength. Said that John Wesley had almost lost his voice and could only be understood with difficulty near the end of his life. But at the last, with all the strength he could summon, Wesley suddenly called out, "The best of all, God is with us." And then raising his hand slightly and raising it, waving it in triumph, he exclaimed again with a thrilling effect, "The best of all, God is with us." God's with you. The question is, have you surrendered to the one who alone can save you? And if you have not, I urge you to do so while there's still time. He can't protect you unless you take refuge in him. Unless he is in your life, you cannot be protected. You may think it's too late, but as long as you have breath in your body, there is still time. Maybe you think, oh, it'd be better if I just wait a little while. I want to have some fun first. But to say this is to show that you don't understand the whole invitation to salvation. This is not a sentence. This is not a punishment. This is not a prison that God is calling us to. He's calling us to a doorway to peace, to life, to strength, to a relationship with God that surpasses any of the trinkets that the world has to offer us. When God is our refuge, we have nothing to fear, including death. This is why Wesley could wave his hand in triumph and confidence even as he faced his own mortality. Don't you want that kind of strength? I do. If you don't have that relationship with God, then change that today. Cry out to him. Say, yes, Lord, I want you to save me. I want you to save me not only from the dangers and the threats around me, but also from the toxic poison of sin that lives inside of me. I reach out to Jesus and recognize that he died in my place, that he is what I need to live even though I die. So today I receive him as my rescuer, as my king, my guide, my protector. Lord, come and take up residence in my life. Be the God of this city. Be the God of this life. Protect me in your strength. What the psalmist tells us is if we will do this, the Lord will take up residence in our life. He'll take up residence in your life just as he has mine. And even though there may be days when we look out at the armies that are standing around our city and we are frightened and we are terrified, the message is that if we will turn to him, if we will rest in him, we have this assurance that when God inhabits a life, the one so inhabited can find rest and eternal peace no matter what's going on around us. The safest place to be is in the boat with Jesus. Let's pray together. Father, sometimes it's hard for us to look past the waves and the armies and the threats that surround us. We become so easily overwhelmed. Father, deliver us from our fears. Teach us to rest in your incredible strength and your enduring love and your wonderful provision of our Lord Jesus Christ. And Father, if there are people here today who are drowning but don't know it, open their eyes. If there are people here today who are pretending at faith, who are mistaking church attendance for true trust in you, open their eyes. For the rest of us, give us the ability to see what is true, that as long as we are in you, we have nothing to fear. Help us to cling to that with all that we have and all that we are, for we ask it in Jesus' powerful name. Amen.